Statistics, don't look into it. Reporting for Channel 666 Daily News about the Korean War. North Korea and South Korea had a war in the Korean Peninsula, and the Korea Demilitarized Zone in the U.S. had supported South Korea and China had supported North Korea. When the U.S. supported South Korea, China had came in and supported North Korea. This would be an example of orientation space in time and space. Impacted Korea positively in the Korean War by the U.S. supporting South Korea against North Korea. The U.S. prevented a domino effect. Here is our expert, William Mickey, to supply you with more information about the Korean War.
Thanks for the transition, Brian. The Korean War isn't a very talked about war because America didn't win. On June 25, 1950, 75,000 North Korean soldiers crossed the 38th parallel into South Korea. This was the first military attack of the Cold War. This sparked the Korean War, which was a good representation of the Cold War as a whole because it was a communist North Korea against the democratic South Korea. Though the war started in June, it wasn't until July that the U.S. came to South Korea's aid, and 3 years later, the war came to a stop with no clear winner. In this war, the U.S. essentially saved South Korea, which begs the question, was the American intervention in the Korean War positive or negative? Well, as you heard earlier, we came to the conclusion that the American intervention in the Korean War was positive because America defended South Korea's independence. North Korea has a plethora of issues, but America saved South Korea from them with their aid in the war. With all of North Korea's problems like poor human rights, South Korea was lucky to have been saved by the U.S., which allows for South Korea to have more freedom to interact with the rest of the world without North Korea's problems, and shows that South Korea is better off without the North. A major difference between North and South Korea is their government, and like I said before, North Korea was communist and South Korea was democratic. Because of their democratic government, South Korea, unlike the North, have a lot more global interactions and are one of the biggest exporters of electronics in the world, which shows that a communist government would have been detrimental to the economy. So in a way, the U.S. involvement saved South Korea's economy. The domino effect was an American belief that if one country fell to communism, the rest would. So they saw the Korean War as a very important battle for democracy. Since the Cold War was going on at the same time, the U.S. felt that it was very important to protect the democracy in Korea, and in a way, defending South Korea showed the domino effect was right because no more countries fell until Vietnam. Overall, the Korean War's positivity is very perspective-based, but it was positive for a majority of the people involved. Thank you for your time. I'll now give you over to Jason with the OPCVO.
The event being analyzed is soldiers being kept as prisoners in North Korea. The title of this source is Prisoners of War Held by the Communist Forces. This source can help us find how other communist countries are involved and how the U.S./U.N. did to help the South Koreans during the war. This source is a primary source written by President Truman and the Department of State and the Office of Intelligence Research. This source was written on January 30, 1952. The people who wrote this source are from the Department of State and the Office of Intelligence Research, including President Truman himself. The value of this source is that it was written during the Korean War, so most of the facts are more likely to be correct. It was also written in the U.S. Since the President of the U.S. was involved. Since it was written in the U.S., we know that the UN was involved in a way. The limitations are, since it was written during the war, we don't know if there were any prisoners before the war has started. Also, since it was written in the U.S., once the information South Korea sends us gets to the U.S., there will be new information since South Korea is pretty far away from the U.S. The purpose of this source is to inform the U.S./U.N. of what the North Koreans are holding. The value of this is, if we know who is being held prisoner and what country they are from, we are or will be able to ask that country for assistance. Also, it mentions the UN. In the source, it already means the UN is involved in a way. Another purpose of writing this source is to persuade other countries to help them end the Korean War. The limitations of these purposes are that, since North Korea is next to China, which is another communist country, we don't know if China is some of the prisoners. Even though it is to inform the people, we don't know anything about China or how it is involved in the war. Also, we want to convince other countries to take our side in this war, which is less likely to happen because other countries will not want to get involved with other foreign countries' problems. Now moving on to our amazing cartoonist, Michael DeLuca. The event being analyzed is
Thanks, Jason. The political cartoon I have for you today is of the domino effect in the Korean War. The three main symbols that are depicted in the cartoon are the dominoes, the glue, and the weapon cart. The two dominoes represent North Korea and South Korea, and how North Korea might start a domino effect of communism. The glue that is shown holding up the South Korean domino represents the U.S.'s involvement in the Korean War in the form of support to the South. Lastly, the weapon cart represents Soviet Union aid to the North in the war. The U.S.'s main reason for intervening in the Korean War was to prevent communism from spreading through the domino effect, which was the belief that if one country fell to communism, the more would follow. However, the war also served as a proxy war between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. That's all I have, so let's send it over to Brian.
South Korea in the Korean War and had made a new democratic ally. Asia may be more of a communist continent. Thank you for tuning in with us and have a nice day.